Let's be honest for once. We need to face reality, we need to face history, and stop pretending. Let's look at things. First century before Christ, the Roman Empire, colonized the territory that is now France, roughly. The goal. They colonized it, they came, and whatever they did, one thing is sure, they constructed roads, they constructed theaters, they constructed a lot of bridges to carry water, in particular, aqueduct. They brought their language, Latin, and today's French is mostly born from Latin. They also brought their law, and their legal system has impacted France very much. Would France today be making noise, asking the Roman Empire or what remains of it, that is Italy, to compensate? Of course, nobody would think about it. Italy is now one of the European countries. We are very friendly with them, and nobody thought about complaining. In fact, one of the good things of Roman colonization was the introducing of Christianity in France. We became Christians because the apostles came as part of the colonization. They just traveled to France, some of them. Now, we know that today there are lots of people, even scholars from Nigeria, who make a lot of noise and a lot of fuss saying that colonizers have brought havoc in Nigeria. Yeah, of course, they didn't come solely to do good. As they came, Christianity came to Nigeria, not as part of colonization, but they traveled taking advantage of colonization to bring their faith to Nigeria. Well, that was not the end of it and not the most important thing you would say. What happened? First of all, they brought literacy. At that time, here and there were some alphabets that had been created, like NCBD in Igbo land. But actually, this was a language for secret society, so it was not the language in use. And missionaries came, studied Igbo language, wrote it down, wrote the whole Bible in it, collected oral history, collected folk tales and other oral literature, wrote it down, and today we enjoy these things. If not, we would not have known. They brought schools, and whatever you may think of it, you pass through it, cannot deny, and you are speaking English. This was a colonizer's language, but now it has opened to you the door to the whole world. They brought hospitals. Yes, they were DBS. They were trying to heal people. I know that there were osteopaths. I knew of one of them that really recently died. But healing was not complete, not what it is today. The benefits of British medical knowledge were brought to us in Nigeria by the colonizers. Not only that they brought it, opened hospitals, brought nurses, but They trained our doctors. Many of them went to Britain on scholarship, came back as medical doctors with all the added knowledge, not only the empirical and traditional knowledge that they might have got, but also the one that was available in more technically developed countries. They brought health care. At that time, they were lepers. But today, there is no leprosy again in Nigeria, or at least in the south. They brought roads. They made roads, tarred roads, that made it possible for people to travel. They brought cars, lorries, all these things that was not existing. They made railways from north to south. And in fact, these railways were working far better those days than they are today. They brought bikes. They brought business companies. And we may say all we want about the fact that Nigeria has not really developed its business companies in infrastructures, but whose fault it is certainly not the one of the colonizers, because they left by 1960. So whatever we don't have today, we only have ourselves to blame. Now we know that slavery at a point was part of the downsides of colonization. But here again, forget about complaining about that, because Islam brought slavery into Nigeria. The Fulanis and other people from Sahel raided the whole of Africa onto the Congos from the 8th century, looking for slaves, and they did far worse than the British and the Americans. They used to castrate all the males that they took, and the mortality rate was phenomenal. Nobody talks about this. Let's be honest. And moreover, slavery was part of life in Igbo land. Almost all the people had a slave in the house. It was house slaves, but even at that, they were slaves. They were people that nobody wanted to have anything to do with, like the Osus. Oh dear, let's not talk about that, yeah? Even now. I remember one day I was in a church at Nsukka with other women, and we were talking about marriage, and somebody said, suppose that an Osu comes to marry your girl, and the women say, "Hey, Tufia!" That was in the 1980s. What did they do? They offered far more, including scholarships, facilities to travel. Of course, it was for their benefit, but it also benefited us, Nigerians. So what I want to say is, before you open your mouth next, go and study. The internet is there if you don't have enough books. You can always find a place where there is internet access. Study. Think well. And be honest. Because scholarship nowadays has turned sour. It has turned real dishonest. It's a lying basket. So we know that interaction has always been not only for bad but for good. And whatever we've learned, we can now apply to ourselves and use it instead of lamenting about the past. Everybody has a past. Everybody has a past. but we can always do better today and tomorrow. So let's be honest, my friends, my colleagues. Study and don't write what is not true.